He got into a really intricate process debate about the fact that he may not have been informed about this decision before the media. That's disputed by Labour, but it shows how bad the blood is. He actually says it tells you everything you need to know about the way that this party is run. So, yes, he says his full focus is on Manchester, but clearly he's very angry and very disappointed in what's happened.
So, has the Andy Burnham decision permanently damaged Sir Keir Starmer? Let's talk to the Times political editor, Steven Swinford. Morning, Steve.
Good morning.
So let's get into this, because one of the big questions for people is, how is this going to play out over the next couple of days? Is it going to look ultimately like Keir Starmer has made the right decision and come out stronger, or will it backfire, do you think?
I'm going to say that there was no right decision here, that what he's done will ultimately backfire. There's a very real risk of that. We are going to get this by-election in either late February or early May in Manchester, and there is a very good chance now that Labour loses that. Andy Burnham could have won that, and indeed Andy Burnham told people effectively, I could have won this if you'd let me stand for it. I think we'll lose it now as a result. So that is a kind of really damaging moment now in the run-up to the local elections, and a dangerous moment for Keir Starmer, where his judgment will be questioned. The counterfactual is, if he had allowed Andy Burnham to run for it, they could have lost the Manchester mayoralty. That would have been a risk. It could have happened. And then he would have had Andy Burnham in the ranks agitating for his removal as an MP, and that would have made his future really hard. So yes, look, either way he was going to emerge weaker, and it's a question of which of the two very difficult paths you prefer, and he's chosen to kind of keep Andy Burnham out at the risk of losing that seat in Gorton and Denton.
And so what are you hearing from Andy Burnham's side of the argument? Is he likely to try and challenge it? Is there any way that he could challenge it? And if not, what will he do? Just go quietly back to being Manchester Mayor? What's his next step?
So he said last night that he wants to put his full focus on Greater Manchester, but at the same time he got into a really intricate process debate about the fact that he may not have been informed about this decision before the media. That's disputed by Labour, but it shows how bad the blood is. He actually says it tells you everything you need to know about the way that this party is run. So yes, he says his full focus is on Manchester, but clearly he's very angry and very disappointed in what's happened. There are a lot of Burnham allies on the NEC who will attempt and are kind of doing letters and trying to organise to get a meeting of the full NEC. So for our listeners, the NEC is Labour's ruling body, and a tiny part of the NEC called the NEC officers, which is led by Keir Starmer, yesterday blocked Andy Burnham from standing down as the Mayor of Greater Manchester, and all those that weren't party to that decision, or a lot of them, are saying, well, we should have been part of that decision, we should get a call. Now, we don't think that there's a mechanism that they can force that to be reconsidered, but nonetheless you'll expect a lot of noise around that. So where does it go from here? Look, there's a lot of noise. I don't see anyone going over the top with an overt challenge to Keir Starmer. I think he's asserted his authority for now, but what it does do is make things much more difficult down the line, particularly if they lose that by-election.
And what is the reaction from Labour MPs? Are they pleased that they see this as decisive action from Keir Starmer, or is it a sort of another sign that potentially the leadership is defensive and worried?
It depends who you talk to. So some ministers we talked to have said this is just a sign of his weakness. It is the kind of another nail in the coffin. He's a dead man walking and he's going to go. And so that genuinely is some of the people who work in government say that this decision is going to damage him because he should have brought Andy Burnham into the House effectively and worked with him as a unity kind of leader, Prime Minister. There are others who say, look, this whole thing was just a massive ego trip by Andy Burnham. It would have been hugely damaging. We'd have probably lost the Manchester mayoralty, and to boot, you'd have had Andy Burnham constantly, going for the Prime Minister from a position in Westminster, which he could have used to precipitate a contest. So, it depends who you talk to. Keir Starmer allies think he's done the right thing. There are others in the party, particularly some ministers, who think this is all going to end very badly indeed.
Well, we might hear from Andy Burnham today. We'll definitely, though, hear from Keir Starmer. He's out and about on a visit. He's also, Steve, heading to China. We're going to talk about some of the events that are happening inside China and the Chinese government in just a few moments' time. But is it a good time for the Prime Minister to be heading to Beijing?
I would gently suggest there's probably not any good time at the moment for the Prime Minister to be heading to Beijing, because on several levels he has said that every second, every moment, I'm not talking about the cost of living, is a moment wasted, and he's probably not wrong in that. His one hope of surviving is to make people feel better off, and there are going to be big questions about how this quite long trip to China, he's going all the way through to Sunday, is going to actually help with that. And to top it off, you've also got all this talk about his leadership, and he's hopping on a plane here, so it will fuel those allegations that he is never here Keir, the guy that has already spent 2.5 months of his premiership outside of the country, obviously adding more days to that now, and that he should be focused on domestic issues. And that's before we even get to the China controversies, which are manifold, whether they are, cyber security, kind of China operating as quasi police stations in the UK, you name it. There are huge issues here, and there's an argument that this is probably not where he wants to be. The argument number 10 would say is this is about bolstering the economy, building trade ties with China. Yes, we think it's a kind of threat and a geopolitical issue, but we have to you have to deal with it. You have to be pragmatic, and this will ultimately make people better off at home. But that is a hard sell when you're actually just thousands of miles away, effectively.
We're going to come on to talk about what's happening in China in just a few moments. But Steve, before you go, what's going on with the Chagos Islands deal? Because it's been held back in the Lords again. There's now a real row over whether it should go ahead and whether it actually can, given that Donald Trump has changed his position. What are you hearing?
So late on Friday, the Tories ambushed Labour. They put down an amendment in the Lords, which was effectively a wrecking amendment that would have killed the Chagos deal. And Labour realised, oh gosh, we haven't whipped enough people for Monday, and we will definitely be defeated. So they want to bring the Chagos deal back in its own time, at a time when they hope they will have better numbers to be able to see off that threat. But look, that means that there is a gap of weeks. And the problem they've got is in that gap of weeks, you have got a US administration that is shifting its position. It has hardened its position against our ceding sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. It's up Donald Trump's agenda. It's up the agenda of a guy called Scott Bessent, who's one of the most powerful people in the administration. He's the US Treasury Secretary. So it's a problem. And Starmer had hoped this issue was behind him. But what the Tories have succeeded in doing through a bit of kind of clever parliamentary gamesmanship on Friday is creating a space into which this whole thing could end up collapsing. So we'll see how it goes. I suspect they'll bring it back in a couple of weeks and try to get it through then, but this cannot happen without the support of the US. And if people like Nigel Farage, Kemi Badenoch and others can succeed in convincing the US it's against their interests in that time, then the whole thing is moot and won't go through.
Well, he's got quite a lot on his plate, hasn't he, Keir Starmer, at the moment. Thanks very much, Steve. As ever, great to have you with us. That's the Times political editor, Steven Swinford.